Good evening, everybody. This is Shankar here. It's 6:30 in India and 9 a.m. in North America. Join us on Indian Express Group's new initiative, Expressions. This is where we get experts, top leaders to come and speak about a current events issue. Today, our guest is Kris Gopalakrishnan, who needs very little introduction on either side of the Atlantic, having been the founder, member of Infosys, and also chairman and CEO of Axelor Ventures now. Welcome to the show, Kris.
Thank you, and thank you, Indian Express Group.
Yeah, so the word unprecedented, I think, needs updation, because everything is unprecedented just now. We are doing this show, which is unprecedented. There are over 3.5 million people infected, over nearly 300,000 deaths. Nearly two-thirds of the world economy is under lockdown. We hear of a $10 trillion stimulus package. Everything is unprecedented, and the uncertainty is unprecedented. So from your vantage point, Kris, how do you look at this pandemic?
Clearly, as you said, it's unprecedented, but I refer to it as a once in a lifetime event. Hopefully this will not get repeated in our lifetime again. And I see the responses that are required are from the lowest level to the highest level. What I mean by this is, as individuals, we have to practice discipline. We have to be responsible. We have to make sure that we take care of ourselves. We take care of our family. The same thing then holds good for a state. The state has to take care of its people. And as a society, global society, we have to collaborate and we have to work together to take care of the situation. So it's very interesting to see. We have an opportunity to really rethink how, as individuals to as a world community, we work in this pandemic. And I think it's a once in a lifetime opportunity to rethink the models that we use as individuals to live, as a community, as a global community. How do we work together?
That's an interesting point. I mean, whether we need new collaborative platforms or we need to sort of update our existing collaborative platforms as a society, as a democracy, even within the family. The pandemic itself, the science of it, I just wanted to spend a few moments on that. It defies definition. There are countries which are affected. There are cities which are affected, not affected. There are kinds of people which are affected. We still don't know whether those affected get immunity. And unlike the other epidemics, there is no clarity as yet on the level of immunity, antibodies in the system for a post-recovery person. So there are a whole lot of questions around this. Do you see India's response in terms of how they approached the issue as adequate, could do better, or inadequate? How would you sort of, and I don't mean this necessarily as a political question, as a people, how are we responding to
it? We will know for sure much later. Unfortunately, we are living through this. Every country is responding slightly differently, and the jury is out which is the best response. We may probably never know which is the right response, because you can't play this back, or you can't, I hope we don't see this coming back again to test out our hypothesis. So we are in real time making hypotheses and testing these out. Those countries which have used science to decide how they need to respond, those countries that have listened to their scientists in responding, maybe have a better, let's say, current status. In that sense, India decided that given its poor healthcare infrastructure, given that a lot of people are living in smaller apartments or smaller dwellings, or many people living in single room facilities, etc., the lockdown would probably be the best way to fight this and buy time for us to prepare better. And we had the strictest lockdown probably in the world. It seems to have helped till now because per capita we have the lowest death rates. And I would only look at the death rates because life lost is life lost forever. And we have been able to save lives. And in that sense, I would say till now, our response has been right. We have focused on lives rather than livelihoods. Now we are transitioning to livelihoods. And here, I think we will face some challenges, because when it transitions to livelihood, that discipline that we impose through lockdown is no more there.
I just want to sort of hold your thought there. So when we come to how India dealt with the issues and how other countries dealt with. So the Indian paradigm was defined by the density of population, density of poverty, density of floor space, and the inadequacy of the healthcare structures. I just finished writing a book on India's public delivery services, and we have 1 million doctors for a population of 1.3 billion, and that's, I mean, it's mind-boggling how we are managing still. But there is a lot of discussion around how Germany has dealt with it, how Korea has dealt with it, how Taiwan has dealt with it, and then of course the Swedish epidemiologist's idea of pushing for immunity. That some people believe that by the lockdown only pushes the curve to the right. It gives the state time to prevent disorder and establish order, and maybe a pause to build in capacity, whatever is needed. The contrarian theory, and of course, as you rightly said, in the absence of counterfactuals, we'll never know. The contrarian theory is that eventually in India and elsewhere in the world, people will get used to this. There will be a certain amount of casualty. The causality might be pre-existing conditions or age or whatever, and the world will move on. And in that sense, where do you stand on the argument of the cure being worse than the illness argument that is there, particularly in North America, definitely in many parts of India? Many people who are affected, the businesses or their livelihoods, are wondering about this question.
So there are two parts to the answer. The first part, as you rightly said, we needed to buy time. We were completely unprepared, as the world was completely unprepared for this, and we had to buy time. And in that time, I think we have put together some response, and I think that was the right thing to do. I believe that was the right thing to do, and we have saved lives. And the single measure I look at right now is that we have saved lives.
Absolutely.
In this time frame. Now, of course, we are shifting to livelihoods to address this issue of, if we don't address the livelihoods, we can lose lives now for, poverty and for not having food to eat and things like that. And so rightly so, we have addressed this, we are starting to address the issue of livelihood. The second part of the answer is that, yes, till we have a vaccine, till we have a cure, this virus is going to be around. And so we need to define what is the new normal and train our people to practice the new normal. So what I mean by this is, after 9/11, if you look at how the security infrastructure came into place. Every building, you go into an airport, we have a security infrastructure in place to prevent people from, smuggling weapons and things like that, right? Similarly, the new normal will be everybody will be checked for temperature. Is there any sign of a illness or something like that, so that then we isolate the person. We need to have a mechanism to do contact tracing and things like that. That becomes the new normal. And I hope that in this time, India has trained its people, because ultimately, till science comes in and helps, it is the individual's discipline and practice that is going to save us. And if we don't do that, then we will actually suffer because of that. And I hope that we practice that. In developed countries, they are able to practice this much better. If you talked about Korea, because of the waves of pandemic that they have faced, the population is practiced in doing that. Even in India, if you look at states like Kerala, they have actually done a much better job, because they have actually faced all kinds of viral attacks and prepared the population to do some kind of a disciplined ethic.
And historically, they've had a very good healthcare system. That's very true.
Right.
Kerala has been a outlier in education and in health throughout India's independent history. The subject, the point that you made about how people changed after 9/11, after the terror attacks, and so frisking and screening became normal. So I guess testing and tracing will be part of the aviation or travel lexicon now, in the sense that we probably might see an X-ray machine which sort of looks at people's, just like if you enter the US, you go through the body scan. There might be new ways, but we will get used to all that. But travel is still a far distance away. And I think the point that you made about societies being trained and disciplined and getting used to, so there is a need for a sociological acceptance or social acceptance of many new ways to protect each other. Yes, that's a very valid point, and people not only have to take responsibility for their own health, but also for the health of others. So that may actually improve our overall health indicators also, if the hygiene aspect sort of comes in. I think that I wanted to touch on one more part of this story, which is what the lockdown is doing to the mental health of people. How are people looking at this? This is a huge anxiety. There are places in the world which have been under lockdown for 60 days. We have been under a lockdown for over 50 days. There is the anxiety of being cooped in smaller spaces or not able to move out. Take a large part of your liberties taken away. I mean, the interesting thing is, I was just reading this yesterday. Thomas Hobbes wrote Leviathan, the idea of the state, while the plague was sort of playing out in Britain, and his worry for loss of order and chaos actually brought him to think about the order of the state. And a lot of liberty has been taken away by the state. They're telling you how to move, when to move, whatever. This is causing anxiety. There is also the economic anxiety, whether you have a job. And if you're distanced from your near and dear, that's a separate anxiety. How do you see this? I mean, you've done quite a bit of work in this area, and this is one of your care and concerns. So I just wanted to sort of pause here before we went into the economic aspects of the new world.
See, we have to look at responses at multiple levels. So we have to address this issue of livelihood. We have to make sure that people have food to eat, a place to live. And that was the response. And I'm extremely glad that many philanthropists, many non-governmental organizations, NGOs came together and made sure that people were fed and people had a place to stay. The most of the daily wage earners were paid salary for some time. Now, of course, the companies will find it more and more difficult to sustain that. So one is to address this issue of hardship. The second is address this issue of isolation, and we have to use technology. There is no other solution. And I'm very glad that the penetration of smartphones and phones with video capabilities increasing. Even I have seen that even laborers are now very much used to using video on their phone to talk to their dear ones. I think we need to make that into a habit, for which we need to make sure that bandwidth is available. So this definitely has shown us the need that in today's age, in the 21st century, bandwidth is actually one of the most important infrastructure requirements. And India has done a good job, but it could probably do even better. The third aspect is, when it becomes a mental challenge, and again, we unfortunately don't have the best of the infrastructures when it comes to healthcare. Mental health is actually a taboo in society. We need to start addressing this very carefully. As a society, we need to be open, transparent about the need for addressing mental health issues and things like that. This actually had become a problem even before this, when the family structure itself had gone to from multifamily this thing to single family, etc. And both husband and wife working, children are not with the parents most of the time. They just come home and sleep. Yeah. So they spend very little time with parents. So there are multiple of these issues, and as a society, I think we need to start addressing this issue of mental health. And we don't even have mental health professionals in the country. So all of these need to be addressed.